Hello everybody, this is Mahadeva, Thunder Wizard. And right, so I'm going to continue reading from my book, Mounting Sleipnir. By the way, you don't have to just watch it on here. You can actually go purchase the book. I had somebody wanted me to spell out something that I was repeating, a phrase that I was repeating, and I thought, why don't you just buy the book? You can read it for yourself. But I know it's tough. Spending $25 is, especially nowadays, with all the nonsense going on. I almost, hopefully, the banks almost completely closed all my accounts. Simply because there was some mix-up in communication or something like that, and they closed two of my accounts and put it off in the mail in checks, $5,000 worth, and they were about to close my main account. Had I not simply checked and called them, it was crazy, so crazy. I'm still waiting to hear what happened to that $5,000. Did you guys find it? It's nuts. Some guy tried to assault me the other day. There's some crazy weird stuff going on in the ethers right now. All right, but I'm going to be not talking about any of that craziness. I'm going to be reading from my book, Mounting Sleipnir. And so this is the 7th live reading. And so now I'm in the chapter called Different Categories of Beings, and that is on page 109 of my PDF version. You may, if you have the actual book, I have no idea, perhaps it's the same page, I don't know. But in any case, this is where I'm going to start. So now things are going to get good. Now we're really getting into the actual book, Mounting Sleipnir. These last categories are really what I wanted to write. This was the main point of this book, and this is where it starts to get really fun. So I'll just go ahead and start reading here. So, chapter is called Different Categories of Beings. Quote, all father acts, elves discern, Vanir know, Norns point the way, woodwives give birth, humans endure, thyrses wait, Valkyries yearn. The previous quote is from the myth entitled Odin's Korpgaldur, which is Odin's corpse song. This quote gives valuable information concerning the role of the indigenous Teutonic understanding of different spiritual beings that exist in the Teutonic animist worldview. So I'm just sitting here struck. Again, it's good to just come into this. I haven't read this in years. I'm really excited about it because I remember when I found that quote, it was so inspiring to me and it explained what all of these beings are. But just the other thing that I really like about it is, just seeing this body of mythological teachings and the beliefs that our ancestors had in all the different kinds of beings that existed in the world. We look at so-called shamanic civilizations and people want to become Native American or, like me, they have to turn to things like Taoism and East Indian spirituality because Western society lost that. We don't have any connection to that, so we have to go to these foreign and I'm not saying that in quotes, we have to go to foreign sources of spirituality that have not been corrupted by Abrahamic monotheism. And when we think about it, how rich and beautiful and primal and primitive and shamanic. They didn't just believe that there was God and angels and demons and that's as far as it went. No, there's all of these different beings that have so many different functions and are It's just so rich and beautiful. And this is, if you're of Western European descent, which it's okay if you're not, but if you are, you can take pride. This is what we used to believe. And speaking for myself, I have an ethnic connection to this. When I read it, I can feel my DNA just being so happy because, my ancestors spent 50,000 years in that part of the world, and they came up with their own experience based on the land and the energy of the land, and it molded their view of spirituality. It turns out a lot of it is as similar as any other place in the world, but some of it is very unique, and certainly the interpretation of it and the poetic beauty of it. It's very unique in that way, and so I have to just acknowledge how beautiful that is. So we're going to start diving into that here. All right, so again, let me read the quote for you from the myth Odin's Corpse Galder. Quote, "All father acts, elves discern, Vanir know, Norns point the way, woodwives give birth, humans endure, thyrses wait, Valkyries yearn." Let's take a look at the different categories of spiritual beings that inhabit the Teutonic mythological landscape. All-Father. Quote, "All Father acts." As we have seen in previous chapters, Woden is the All-Father. In this verse, it states that Woden acts, meaning Woden does. What exactly does this mean? Woden is the unification of all three powers of Wod, Will, and Weoch. In case you don't know, somebody said, "What is that?" and they were trying to spell it. So Odin, Vili, and Ve in Old Saxon is Woden, Will, and Weoch, which means consciousness, willpower, and sacred spirit. All right, let's keep going. That is why he is the master of Wod, shamanic awareness. Only one who has aligned all three numinous powers has complete awareness and is worthy of the title Awareness Master, Woden. Well, in my opinion, this verse means that the individual who has activated and balanced all three power centers of Woden, Will, and Weoch has the ability to take conscious and effective action in the realm of Midgard, or Middle Earth. This isn't to say that those who have not balanced and aligned their three power centers are unable to take action. It is just that from a spiritual perspective, their actions will either lack complete effectiveness or will result in unintended consequences. The pre-Christian Teutons and the modern Hindus share a similar concept concerning the resultant consequences of one's actions. The Hindus call this cycle of action and reaction karma. I will address this concept of karma because it is a very familiar concept with most people. I would like to add that some people mistake the Teutonic concept of orlog for karma. I myself have often likened karma to orlog for simplicity's sake, but to be truthful, they are different concepts. Orlog is more connected to the idea of dharma than to karma. We will discuss orlog when we examine the Norns. One misconception of karma that many have made is that it is a bad thing. If one forgets to put his change into the tip jar at the corner coffee house, the teller might tap the jar and say, "Hey dude, tap, 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 karma bro," indicating that if you don't leave a tip, you may incur some bad karma resulting from your inaction. However, karma is a totally neutral concept. Karma comes from the Indo-European root word for action. Karma signifies the actions that one takes through their own effort. There is both pleasant and unpleasant karma. It is nothing more than the natural result one gets from their actions. Karma is neither good nor bad. Because most humans are still in the process of reaching toward the state of Woden, most of their actions will naturally have some kind of unintended consequence that has to be dealt with. This is why the Hindus believe that people can accumulate karma. This just means that it is unavoidable that we will avoid creating unintended fallout in our lives. This is the reason for spiritual discipline. By following a spiritual discipline and following spiritual guidelines, we are more likely to avoid unintended fallout. Traditional indigenous spiritual disciplines have been practiced and refined for tens of thousands of years, so it only makes sense that traditional animist spiritual practices will be helpful in guiding people towards making effective choices and actions in our lives. There is also so-called good karma. It really isn't good, it just means that whatever consequences we experience are more helpful and pleasant in helping us achieve our orlog, or destiny. When we accomplish this, it feels good to us, so we associate this consequence as a reward for our behavior, so we call it good. The truth is that we learn equally from both good and bad karma. Bad karma is much less pleasurable to endure, but sometimes is a more effective teacher in regards to effective achievement of our orlog. In terms of Woden's actions, since he is completely connected to all three of his power centers, he is able to make decisions without any misinterpretation of the signals he receives from the living cosmos. So his actions have no unintended consequences, and thus, he is better able to fully achieve his objectives. That is why he is known for his actions. But his actions are fully based in complete spiritual awareness. That is another reason why he is called Master. All right, so, I kind of want to say more. I'm not quite sure what. But Odin is, if we're talking astrologically, which is, we're splitting hairs, but astrologically, he is connected to Mercury, which is the intellect. And his fiery nature and his, quote, rageful nature, which, we perceive it as rage, but it's only rageful looking to us because of its intensity. And that's because he has no, he has no illusions that are binding him down to this material plane. He's free from it. So he's intensely burning with the fuel of his own awareness at all times. So he looks crazed. He looks enraged. But it only looks that way to us because it's harmful to us, because in order for us to be human, we have to have illusion. Your kundalini, which is your illusion. Kundalini is illusion, by the way. In case you think kundalini is awareness, it's not. It is the burning away of the illusion that creates awareness, but it binds you. That's why it comes out of your root chakra. That's why it's a snake. That's why it's feminine. It has to do with binding you to your physical body. If you burn through all of your karma, your body will disappear. You won't be human anymore. So Woden represents the complete burning awareness of the intellect, which again, the intellect is, people call it the mind. Western society, when they use the mind, they either mean the brain and or the intellect. The intellect actually keeps you from achieving unity, and that's necessary, because if you were in a state of unity all the time, you wouldn't be able to function. You wouldn't be able to put your clothes on or drive on the right side of the street, or just know what's what, anything. You need your intellect to know this is that, this is there, this is good, that is bad, up and down. And so Woden represents the intellect going beyond the limitations of three-dimensional reality. And so it's like the burning away of all the limitations. That's why he's just this burning, crazy wisdom. I always see him as being mischievous, like just laughing uncontrollably and just full of mischief, which is ironic because that's the word we use for Loki. But Loki is actually far more contemplative. My experience of Loki is that, yeah, he laughs and he makes jokes, but it's like going through this thing with the banks. And I was talking with the guy on the phone, who was saying, yeah, I don't have really information about it. And I just started laughing. So I'm like, you telling me that you closed 2 of my accounts and you don't know why? I mean, and he's like, yeah, that's all the information I have. I have to, and I just started laughing because it was either I laugh or I cry or I punch a hole in the wall. It's just, that's the kind of laughter that Loki has. Loki laughs, but he doesn't laugh because he thinks it's ridiculously funny. He laughs because of the absurdity of it all. He's actually very morose, almost. He's very, of all the gods, he's the most real. Of all the gods, if Loki thinks that you are connected to your true self, he will be straight with you and direct with you and more honest than anybody. But because it's impossible for humans, because they have this kundalini that binds them to the illusion of this reality, he laughs and he pokes at it. And he shows it because he knows you can't. If he were to tell you, absolute truth, it would destroy you. So he laughs and he makes a joke. But he's always trying to get you there. Woden is far more mischievous than Loki. Although Woden doesn't seek to trick you. He doesn't seek to, mystify you or, although he could. He's definitely a magician in his own right. He's just wrapped up in the wonder of everything. So, but I see him as just laughing and smiling and mischievous, and always got a glint in his eye. He's just, I think a lot of people really don't understand him. When you see these pictures of Woden, or Odin, and he's this battle-hardened warrior with the. I get that. It's all projection, I think. That's the projection of people. He's the All-Father, so they want to project this invincibility to him, and he's just this big tub. But that's not him at all. Not even close. At least in my experience, anyway. So I just wanted to talk about that before we go any further. There's so many things to talk about. Woden acts. So it means that he's all about practical action. He does. So he is the embodiment of when the intellect, which sits around and thinks, right? People who are trapped in their head, they sit around and they think all the time. And they talk about that. This is why people who smoke pot, they can talk about things forever, but they won't get anything done. They can come up with the most perfect business model for that, but they'll never do it. They just talk about it because THC gets you stuck in your brain, gets you stuck in your intellect. And people think that's what Woden is also, but he's not. He is the embodiment of the intellect that now takes effective action to achieve awareness. Anyway, we can talk about Woden forever, but I'll leave it there for now. Next chapter, Elves. And if you remember the quote, Elves discern. So Woden acts, Elves discern. There is a very good reason why elves are so beloved. Unlike post-Christian images of elves, they are not little pointy-eared imps prancing around making mischief, nor do they work in Santa's workshop. If there is a Santa, whatever beings work for him are more likely to be some race of dwarves rather than elves. Elves are the revered and ascended masters of the human race who guide mortals toward their personal and collective orlog. Orlog is made up of 2 words, origin, law, or log, aka destiny. In surviving historical accounts concerning the pre-Christian belief in elves, there is a great deal of mystery and awe connected to them. In times past, during the pre-Christian Norse ritual of Alfablot, or elf ritual, only those people who revered the sacredness of the elves would be allowed on a polytheist's property. In other words, somebody who had not converted to Christianity, if you were a Christian during the elf ritual time, they would chase you off. They would not allow you. They would chase you off with whatever weapon they had. Hospitality is one of the most cherished traditions of ancient Teutonic people. However, during the late autumn, during the elven sacrifices, if a Christian tried to seek shelter in a pagan home, he would be chased off the property at the other end of a blade. Such was the deep reverence and respect given to the elves by pre-Christian Teutons that they did not wish to offend the ascended masters by having someone who did not respect their wisdom on their property during the time of the Alpha Blot. Clearly, the elves were to be held in the deepest respect. Late autumn is also the time of the modern holiday of Halloween. Halloween possibly has roots in both Celtic and Teutonic pagan rituals. In most traditional animist cultures, the time of late autumn is known as the time when the veil between the living and the dead was at its thinnest. It is at this time that one can have the most powerful communication with the ancestral spirits. Mexicans celebrate the Day of the Dead, which has a strong connection to the honoring of one's ancestors stemming from pre-Christian native Mexican animist beliefs. On All Saints' Day in England, which was celebrated on the day following Halloween, children and the poor would go from house to house collecting soul cakes, promising to pray for the souls of the dead for every cake they received. So even among Christians, this time of year still retained the pagan understanding of honoring the ancestors. It seems that the practice of honoring the ancestors was so deeply ingrained into the native European mindset that Christians had to find some way to integrate this custom to Christian rituals. But instead of honoring the dead, Christians would instead pray for them. While this diminishes the status of the ancestors, it still allows the principle of honoring them to be practiced. In my experience, the elves are very accessible to those that seek them. Having experienced their guidance and presence, I can fully understand why the pre-Christian Teutons had such a deep reverence for them. I do not merely see the elves as humans who have died. Some people who die travel to the underworld and are destined to be reborn. In modern Teutonic animism, we do practice rituals honoring the deceased and make offerings for their well-being. While all deceased humans are considered ancestors, not all ancestors are elves. Only those ancestors and spiritual entities that have achieved a very high spiritual status of mastery are considered elves. Teutonic mythology makes it very clear that there is a special world called Hell for those deceased humans who are still destined to be reborn. They dwell in the underworld known as Helholm. The name is derived from the goddess Hela, who governs the realm of regeneration. Just for the record, even though the modern English word for the Christian realm of eternal damnation and suffering called hell is taken from the pre-Christian Teutonic underworld realm called Hell, the similarity stops there. The Teutonic realm of Hell is a place of regeneration and healing for human souls before they re-enter life as human beings. The elves, however, have their own realm known as Elfholm. Elves discern describes the spiritual function of the ascended masters in our lives. When called upon, the elves help us to access our higher awareness to discern our optimal life paths. One of the main functions of the elves is to guide us and the entire human race toward our highest orlog, or destiny, in order to choose our most effective life paths. In order to do so, we need discernment. This is a power that the elves can share with us. So my experience, again, I didn't put this in here, but the discerning part. When I work with elves and I believe that I'm receiving information from them, which was really not really information, but guidance, there is always this overwhelming unification of action within my own life and how it affects the evolution of all things. So whenever the elves communicate, they are always seeking to discern what is the end game of whatever you think you do, your relationships. And so when you work with the elves, you might become aware of, oh my God, when I do this, what I'm really doing unconsciously is this, and that makes me feel this way, which then makes me do that with somebody else, which makes the when I operate from my highest awareness, I feel like this, and that helps this. You know, I mean, sometimes there was a time, a week or so ago, I was talking with somebody, one of my apprentices, who's really taken off. I mean, life has just opened up, and this person, you know, has really worked their tail off, and they've taken all of my instruction to the letter, and they consistently practice it, and their life just, you know, opportunities just out of nowhere just showed up after really hard work of seemingly nothing's ever going to happen. And I sort of had this elf flash of awareness that, that was a big deal. That I had impacted somebody and completely changed somebody's life. And, one could make the argument, which I'm not, but one could make the argument that had I not been there, that person wouldn't have woken up and followed their path, which of course isn't reality because the universe doesn't work like that. But I was part of that. And by me doing my job of following my path and teaching it to others, that sparks it. Now that guy's going to go off and he's going to teach others. And there's going to be just, innumerable amount of other people who are going to be affected because of that. And that's the kind of message the elves give. Listen, what you do ripples out into eternity. You can't separate yourself from anything or anybody. And so when you're working with the elves, you'll walk away with a feeling of awe and responsibility, which is probably why our ancestors were so serious about not letting Christians onto their property. Now, bear in mind, Christians, and what was happening during this time is that this was taken specifically from some historical record from Christians who were on a missionary path to somewhere to convert some king or something like that, somewhere in Scandinavia, and they were passing through a pagan part of the country, and so they happened to be walking during autumn, and they sought shelter, which was normal. People did it all the time. They'd let the Christians in, they'd let whomever, because that was just what you did. And it was part of your spiritual responsibility to, whenever somebody comes and needs a place to stay, you give them a place to stay, you feed them, and then you help them on their way. And so when the Christians showed up and they were chased off with pitchforks and swords, and it was really shocking to them. So that tells you that there's such tremendous reverence in what the elves do, that what Christians do back then when they were converting somebody, the priest would show up with the holy water, and he would shake the holy water on all of the standing stones and all of the trees, and he would cast out all of the demons, which were ancestral spirits. And there's one account of a guy who did that. He was I think he was an elder or whatever, and in order to function, he had to become Christian in order to do business and make money. And so, the Catholic priest comes over and he goes out and he's doing his thing on the standing stones and on the trees and everything like that. And the guy goes to sleep, and his father or his grandfather, comes to him in a dream and says, "What are you doing? Why are you getting rid of us? We're here to help you. What the hell's your problem?" That's what Christians did. So during the time of the elf bloat, you would not let a Christian on there because Christians were out there trying to disconnect you from the ancestors because they were telling you your ancestors were demons. So, I don't see them rushing out full of rage. I see them with fear in their eyes, like, you have to leave. You got to get out of here. The elves are here. You got to get out of here. I think it was more like that. They probably didn't understand, and they probably thought, why are they so angry? But probably if you were to talk to the people and they're like, we don't want to get cursed. Please don't step foot on here. It's bad for you. You won't survive the night. The elves will not tolerate it. Which may or may not be true, but it just means that the tremendous amount of reverence that they had for the law of the interconnectedness of all things, of all nature. That was one of the most holy times, and you didn't want somebody coming on that was going to bring that level of disbelief. It just, you just don't do that. So, let's continue. So, elves discern, and then we go to Vanir. So, Woden acts, elves discern, Vanir know. In Teutonic lore, the Vanir are called the elder gods. This is not a reference to their chronological age. It is a reference to their connection to being part of our three-dimensional frame of reference. Within three-dimensional space-time is the aspect of time. The Aesir are the younger gods, not because they appeared later in time, but because of their timelessness. They exist in a realm of idealized perfection outside of time. They are ever young because they have no sense of time. The celestial gods are always in a state of idealized perfection. This is why their realm is called Asgard, which means fortress of the celestial gods. The Aesir do not want their reality to change. They are brilliant beings of light who resonate with the brilliance of being of the They are brilliant beings of light who resonate with the brilliance of the beginning of the existence of the cosmos. Time brings decay. This decay dulls the shine of the stars. The Aesir are opposed to this. Only 2 of the 9 worlds of the world tree are called fortresses. The rest of the 7 realms are called homes. So why is Asgard, Osgard, celestial deity fortress? So why is Asgard a fortress and not a home? Because the Aesir seek to keep out all influences that they perceive to be a threat to their timeless perfection. Change resulting from the passage of time threatens the perfection of Asgard. The Vanir dwell in Vanaheim, which means home of the Vanir. Why do they not live in a fortress like the Aesir? Because the Vanir are gods of physical experience. They wish to experience our 3-dimensional cosmos. Unlike the Aesir, who seek to shelter themselves from time, the Vanir seek it out. As a result, the Vanir are much more tolerant of imperfection than the Aesir. Have you noticed that within modern heathenry, those folks who are more conservative tend to lean towards the Aesir, whereas the more tolerant, liberal-minded lean more toward the Vanir? The Vanir are much more tolerant because they have watched things change. They understand that imperfection is part of evolution. Therefore, when imperfection arises, the Vanir appreciate that only through mistakes do we learn. Learning through experience is the basis of knowledge and wisdom. Therefore, tolerance is a fundamental aspect of experiential wisdom. The Vanir are tolerant, patient, and wise. Freyja has a magical gem called Brisingamen, which means flaming mind. The Vanir are masters of meditation. They possess what we moderners might call enlightenment. Unlike the impulsive Aesir, represented by Woden, who act, the Vanir observe and gain knowledge, therefore they know. Worship of the Aesir can be a very intense experience. This is a result of experiencing the energy of the brilliance of the timeless Aesir who vibrate with the light of the newly born stars. Worship of the Vanir brings peace, bliss, and awareness, the awareness that comes from eons of experience. Before I go any further, I just want to talk about something here. You know, one of my pet peeves is the narcissism and the naivete and the ignorance of academic learning. I am an academic, but what I found is that most academics are still wrapped up in the medieval mindset. So bear in mind that, you know, modern day universities, again, I'm a big fan of going to university. I believe that everybody, you know, should have some kind of higher education, just so that you know what's going on in the world. You know, what's amazing out here is that people here in Australia know that Americans are pretty ignorant. You know, it's just common knowledge that Americans really are kind of ignorant. They don't know anything outside of their own sphere of influence. They're xenophobic. Their nationalism is, you know, there's a blindness to it, and they just understand that. And since I've been here for a year, just being out of the United States for a year, even without people talking to me about it, I've sort of kind of woken up to some things that I realized I just took for granted. Like, Americans invented modern democracy. It's like, wait a second, actually we didn't do that. The feeling that the British Empire was ruled by a tyrant that was, you know, similar to some kind of despot that destroyed everybody's lives. And no, there was actually already a very strong form of independence movement and democracy that was forming in England. We just happened to be on the wrong end of some taxes for a war that, depending on who you talk to, we started with the Indians, and they came to our defense and they wanted us to pay for it. We didn't like that, so we rebelled. We threw a bunch of tea in the water. But, Britain was well on its way towards the same kind of democracy that, the United States claims to have. All those kinds of things I realized I had sort of been hypnotized into believing. Now that I'm here, I'm realizing, I sort of have that same feeling, especially when I watch news and I watch politics of the U.S. It's like, oh my God, they are so wrapped up in themselves. So this is kind of the awareness that comes through experience, and so that same kind of narcissism is what bothers me about medieval knowledge, the way that we go after knowledge. So as I was saying, academics are still following the medieval idea of knowledge, which is all based in Christian thinking. Because back then, in the Middle Ages, the idea was we are Christians, we are educated. Like, we are Americans, we are the inventors of freedom. That's just such a childish. It's just there's just no truth to that. It's just it was just one expression of democracy that was popping up all over the place. But the academics who believe that they know what happened, and so they project backwards. And when academics, even heathen academics, project backward, they project backward into time this feeling of superiority and this condescension towards our ancestors, even though they say, I love my ancestors, but they'll say things like, well, the gods are a way of understanding how science works, that kind of thing. And so this is this is a long way of talking about, people think that the Vanir being the younger gods, people will say, oh, that's because our Indo-European ancestor, a warrior horseman, came down out of the steppes of Russia 7,000 years ago and conquered all of the peaceful indigenous hunter-gatherers. And so those hunter-gatherers had a maternal religion where they worshipped Mother Earth and earth spirits, and then came in these horse warriors who had the belief in the Aesir, or these celestial gods. And so the Aesir are the gods of the conquering horse warrior Indo-European Aryans, and the Vanir are the gods of the indigenous, earth-loving, peaceful, less evolved, and this was all a theory. This was all a theory that was introduced hundreds of years ago, before archaeology and linguistics and DNA evidence were even known about. But because it's the Holy Grail, this idea of the Indo-European migration conquest theory, which, if you don't know what it is, and they still probably teach it in college. They taught it when I was in college. What they teach you is that, the Indo-Europeans, which is, all the languages of Europe, all the Germanic languages, Latin, Greek, the Slavic languages, and some others that, less known or extinct, those all came from these people called the Aryans, who were these light-skinned, blonde-haired, blue-eyed horse warriors that lived up in the steppes of Russia, and they swooped down across all of, Europe and parts of the Middle East, and they brought with them this horse warrior culture, and they conquered everybody, and they gave them their language, and that's why there's these different Indo-European languages. And they'll tell you that this all happened in the space of about 7,000 years. And this comes from hundreds of years earlier when British people went down into India and started hearing them speak and started reading the Vedas and went, oh, the Vedas sound a lot like Greek and Latin and English and German and others. So there must have been, we must have gone down here and conquered these people and given them their language. And so that's why it's called Indo-European. That's why it has the word there, Indo-European. Because it comes from this false theory that a bunch of white people conquered everybody and gave them their language and culture. And that's just not at all how it went. And so if you're in this academic bubble, like neo-heathen academic bubble, you will hear them say this, the Vanir, those are the gods of the people who lived there who were the hunter-gatherers, and then the Indo-Europeans came in and brought the Aesir. So that's why there's a war between the Aesir and the Vanir, because it's a war between these two different religions that have sort of had this détente merging, and they don't even open their eyes to look a little bit to the southeast, to the Vedic tradition, and go, oh, the Vedic tradition has the exact same scenario where you have the Devis and the Asuras. Oh, it's the exact same thing, and it's a slightly different interpretation. They switch the wording around a little bit, but it's the exact same thing. And so that's why this is such a passionate thing for me to say the Vanir are not the elder gods because they represent some older substrata that was conquered by the white, blonde-haired, blue-eyed Aryan horse warriors. It's always been part of Indo-European religion. It was part of the religion when it was brought up from Africa 50,000 years ago. And it spread out, and they spread out all over the northern hemisphere, and then were locked into little pockets during 50,000 years of ice ages, or 40,000 years of ice ages. And then they had their own distinct flavor of Indo-European, and while they're trapped in their little ice pockets for 40,000 years, their ethnicity changed to adopt to whatever their surroundings needed from them. And that's why now we have Indo-Europeans who are dark-skinned, dark-haired, dark-eyed, and then you have some with red hair and blue eyes, but they're speaking the same language and they're worshiping the same religion, although be it separated by 40,000 years. And you don't know this if you're just simply going off of the medieval understanding of academia. This is why it bothers me. And I go through all this explanation because I realized a long time ago that people just don't have a clue what they believe and why they believe it. And so I feel like I have to really, pick it apart so you can see how this all came together. So the Vanir are not elder gods because they were the gods of the hunter-gatherers, because it's been part of our religion from the beginning. From the very first creation of our understanding of spirituality, we understood that there were two races of deities. One represented the light of the stars, and one represented the evolution within space-time. And this is why all this is going on. Anyway, let's keep going. So, we've got Woden acts, Elves discern, Vanir know, Norns point the way. Norns. This quote is rather obvious to anyone familiar with Norns and Teutonic lore. I have written extensively about Norns in some of my other books concerning runes, so I will try and keep my explanation about them here short and to the point, hopefully. In Teutonic mythology, the multiverse is composed of a conscious web of life force energy called weird. We use the word weird every day in modern English, and the constant use of this word in modern times underscores the sheer power of the concept of weird in traditional Teutonic mythology that even Christianity was not able to eradicate. In times past, when we knew who we were, weird was a force of immense power. Nowadays, we use this word to describe unusual, unexplained, and frightening phenomena. Weird in modern parlance almost always has a negative supernatural, perhaps an evil connotation. But our ancestors understood that all things that occurred in the multiverse had a logical and reasonable explanation. Just because we humans did not completely understand the cause of everything, we still knew that the natural world was empowered with a conscious life force energy and therefore logical. This understanding of the interconnectedness of all things did not reduce the level of awe we experienced. In fact, it would increase the sacredness of an event. It might still be a frightening occurrence, but the fear would have contained an understanding that all things have a spiritual origin. There are 3 titanic giantesses called Norns that govern the force of weird, whose names translate as origin, coming into being, and debt, or first cause, present, and future. Time is a flowing river that is influenced by every minute action and thought. The present moment is not static. It is constantly unfolding. Therefore, it is called coming into being. Another translation of the word, I forget what it is now, but another translation of it is Schuld. Yeah, another translation of verdandi, which means the present is immediate, right now. Immediate, just the constant now that's continuing to happen. So I translate it as coming into being. The circumstances of the present moment are the inescapable result of the fixed patterns held in the past called origin. The actions taken in the present create new fixed patterns which must immediately become the past. These fixed patterns must be expressed in the future. Therefore, the future is called debt, because the results of past choices must be paid for in the future to keep balance in the life force web of weird. This is how Norns point the way to our highest Orlog. So I really was trying to keep things short there. But let me go over again how I see this. We experience time linearly, and it's an illusion. We remember the past, and we think of the future, and we think we're in the present, and we think we're going along this path, and we're looking into the rearview mirror and looking forward, and that's how we think time works. But the more that I continue to exist on this planet, and the more that I try to interface with the other side and with other beings, whether they be ancestors or gods or whatever, the more feeling I get that time is not linear, and that is our illusion. My experience of working with ancestors and gods is they have this ability to sort of get ahead of me and leave things in the future that I'll find, and that the past is always sort of reorienting itself and changing based on my experience of myself now and what I reflect and project out of myself now, and so that the past and the future really aren't as stable as we think they are. And so what's most important is what you do right this second. This is why having a meditative process and discipline is extremely important, because the meditation is not the sitting down and the breathing or the chanting or whatever it is. The meditation is life. After you're done chanting, you walk around. The meditation is when something happens. Like a lot of crazy shit's been happening to me just in the past few days. I don't know if I'm the only one, but I mean, I've been talking about like the 2 of my accounts got closed, and I'm scrambling around to try and figure out what the hell my bank thinks it's doing, and can they find $5,000 that's floating around somewhere, and all the stupid ridiculous excuses about why they can't put the money back into my account and all this other. I mean, how the hell did that happen? What's going on in the world? And then a couple days ago, some guy tried to assault me. I think he was a meth head or something like that, and he pushed all kinds of weird buttons in me and took everything in me, to not respond and react. I did. I reacted a little bit. I mean, you wouldn't have known it if you saw. Inside of me, I reacted. And a bunch of old stuff came up from my past and my childhood that this guy was sparking in me. And so it's just been so intense and crazy just the past 3 days. And so I've been really aware of every single moment, being clear about what am I doing right now. When I'm talking, when I'm on the phone talking to somebody at my bank and I'm listening to them tell me we don't know, how we're going to get the money back or why that happened, I'm doing everything in my power not to destroy them and to remember, listen, this is just somebody on the other end of a phone who's working in front of a screen, and they're doing their best, and it's not their fault, and your job is to try and help them do their job, not blow up at them and tell them what the hell is your serious fucking problem. You guys are supposed to And looking back at how I was, the signs of this starting to happen, because the confusion is simply because I'm not in the country. Long story short, I'm not in the United States, so they get a little weird and they don't know what's happening to me, and so they did some stupid things. Had I been on top of that and not been so trusting, and had I responded to their emails to me months ago, with a little more awareness, I could have prevented this. But I was expecting them to do their job, and I forgot that they don't. They're tiny people in this huge, giant thing we call the banking industry, and nobody really knows what the hell's happening. So I'm having to really take a look at myself, and I'm having to really realize, those seemingly innocuous choices that I made just because I just let things do what they're supposed to do, or just give people the benefit of the doubt, or I don't want to deal with that right now or something, that got me here. Because every choice that you take in the moment is creating your past and your future. And so that's all we have is the present moment. That's all we have. I remember, I'll never forget this. One of the greatest gifts that my fiance, who now passed, gave me was, this was when she was starting to get sick. Been at the doctors and hospitals all day and whatever. And she wanted to know what was going on with me, and this, she always loved to hear what was happening in my life. And I started complaining about something like I just did, something ultimately really not that big of a problem, but was a big problem to me. And she looked at me with no judgment and no anger, and she said, "I wish I had your problems." And it just struck me like, wow, all we have is the moment. And she's just, lives in the moment. That's all she has is the now, and making the most of whatever she has, or had. And that is still true for all of us. Look at what's going on with this pandemic thing. There's no end in sight. I thought when this first erupted, I thought it would be over by June. I thought by June they would have it all figured out, or there would, blah. But now look at it's August. I was just talking with people in Los Angeles. One of my friends got it. Another person, half of her family got it. People are still, depending on where you live in the States, people are still walking around with masks on, and everything's closed and shut down. And we can't bank on anything. We don't know what's going to happen. All we have is the present moment and what we choose to do. And whether or not we respond out of the integrity of our soul, whether or not we respond out of the awareness that we are infinite human beings on this finite earth plane, under the illusion of past, present, and future. Anyway, so that's the Norns. I'll do one more, and then I'll take any questions. So the next one is whites. Whites, this is what whites are. I'm not talking about white people. WIGHTS, which means nature spirits. Whites. The word nothing in Old English, was it Old English? Or was it Proto-Germanic? The word for nothing was nawicht. na, wicht, which we now know as not. Na wicht meant no spirit, nothing. So in order for something to exist, it has to have a spirit. If it doesn't have a spirit, it's na wicht. Isn't that beautiful? So where was I? So Woden acts, elves discern. Is that what it is? Woden acts, elves discern, Vanir know, and Norns point the way. And then we have woodwives give birth. Wicht, W-I-G-H-T, is an ancient Germanic word for what we would call a nature spirit. It's pronounced white now. The word white can be translated as spirit or even life force energy. For our European ancestors, everything in the universe had a spirit. Everything had its own white. In Teutonic folklore, there were wights that lived inside the trees of the deep forest called woodwives. To best understand the word woodwife, we need to understand the original meaning of the word wife. In modern English, wife means the female spouse within a married relationship. But originally, the word weef, which is how it was pronounced, simply referred to a female human. So a woodwife can be translated as tree woman. A woodwife was a feminine nature spirit. The feminine gender attributed to these spirits is symbolic of the nurturing power of nature. Whenever bread was cooked, it was customary to leave a small loaf in the forest as an offering to the woodwives. Whenever women were weaving, they would toss a small woven portion of their hair into the fire as offerings to the woodwives. If humans ever aided a woodwife in the forest, she might give them a pouch of seemingly worthless wood chips that would magically turn to gold if they decided to keep the gift. The true value of the gift would only manifest if the recipient decided to keep the seemingly worthless gift out of respect. For those who did not have respect, they would throw away such a gift because they could not see the immediate value of it. This asks the question, what does nature really give to us? At first, it may seem pointless to keep large forests around, but for those who respect nature, her immense riches eventually become evident. Even today, the vast majority of our pharmaceutical drugs come from the forest. Our forests are the lungs of the planet, providing us with life-giving oxygen. We need vast wild forests if we are able to survive this world. According to Germanic mythology, whenever a woodcutter would chop down a tree in the forest, he had to carve 3 crosses in the shape of a triangle within which another triangle would be carved. This magical symbol would be carved onto the remaining stump of the tree he cut down. It was believed that if a tree was cut down without this ritual carving, then the woodwife, the spirit of the tree, would die. This could endanger the whole forest because it was believed that the woodwives were responsible for the health of the forest. If the woodwives all died, then the forest and all of the animals in the forest would die too. If the forest died, where would the game live? Where would people get wood for their houses? Where would they get herbs for healing? The magical symbol carved into the stump acted in the same way that modern practitioners of magic use triangles in evocation rituals. The triangle is used as a safe environment for the spirit evoked. The triangle becomes the home for the spirit. The knowledge that every time a tree was felled could possibly kill a powerful tree spirit certainly made the act of cutting down a tree a very serious and sacred act. If people did not absolutely need wood, the trees were left in peace to nourish the animals and plants. You can imagine that if every time we cut down a tree, we had to perform a ritualistic carving to preserve the life of the tree spirit, we would be much more picky about which trees we cut down. Just the consumption of time involved in such ritualistic stump carving would reduce the number of trees felled. How different our understanding of nature is today, where entire forests are burned down or mindlessly clear-cut for profit. For our ancestors, it was believed that if humans did not treat tree spirits with respect, that the woodwives would bring down bad luck, sickness, or even death upon the tree cutter and their loved ones. If a human encountered a woodwife while walking in the forest, she would often ask for help or offer a gift of some kind. If the human refused the gift or denied the woodwife help, then the tree spirit would be offended and possibly seek revenge on the human and his or her family. So whenever someone was alone in the forest and came upon a lone woman, it was customary to be very friendly to her because she might very well be a woodwife in disguise. I remember learning about similar beliefs while watching a documentary about indigenous tribes in New Guinea. I'm not sure of the exact location. When the tribesmen would cut down trees for their canoes, they would bring a shaman into the forest to speak to the forest to see which trees were willing to be cut down. After locating the willing trees, the men would sing to the tree spirit and ask for its blessing and help. Only after the shaman received the tree's permission would the tribesmen cut down the tree. They would continue the ritualistic singing while carving the canoe to make sure that the tree spirit would be happy and move on to the next world in peace. It was believed that if the hunters chopped down a tree without permission, that the tree spirit would be homeless and angry and seek revenge on the whole tribe, causing sickness or death. Sound familiar? Once again, I am thrilled to see that our European ancestors were no less primitive in their understanding of the natural world than every other animist tribal culture. Woodwives give birth simply means that the life-giving power of nature is responsible for the continuation of all life on our planet. This would have been obvious to our pre-Christian ancestors. Regardless of how literal we understand these myths, the message is still the same. If we do not respect our natural resources, we are endangering our own lives. If we are to survive, there must be a conscious understanding that we live in a finite ecosystem that must be treated with respect. If we do not preserve the balance in nature, we are only hurting ourselves. Disrespecting nature is an act that will eventually result in our own death. May we actively seek to repopulate wild places with the whites of nature who nurture and protect our lives through the healing and nurturing power of plants. All right, and then in the next one we talk about humans, so we'll save that for another time. There's something I wanted to say here, which I'm trying to remember. I guess the thing that was popping into my mind was, humans, all human souls, in my belief, and as you know, humans, we are a community, meaning each individual is a community of beings. We're not just one being. There's a soul, which is where your identity is connected, your eternal identity. There's a higher self, which is connected to the ancestors and the elves. And then there's the lower self, which is an emotional self. It's all of your psychological constructs, and it has its own life force energy. And according to many shamanic beliefs, when you die, these three essences go into different realms. The higher self goes to wherever the hell that goes. The soul goes either to the underworld or to Valhalla and or back to another human. And then the lower self, when it leaves, it becomes a nature spirit. Unless the person dies with serious unresolved issues and or violently or something like that, in which case it gets squished out onto the world and it doesn't realize that it's dead. It thinks it's that person, and that's what we call a ghost. We think ghosts are the souls of people. They're not the souls of people. They're the conscious, all of the psychological stuff, their name, who they are, all of their emotions. It just floats around thinking it's 1875 or 1923 or whatever it was that they died. And those lower selves, in my belief, are making their way to becoming a soul. And so the way that they earn the right to become a soul is they are the lower self of somebody. And they allow the soul to root into the earth and to have emotions and psychology and delusions and aspirations and all those things associated with your lower vibration. And so nature spirits that are out in the trees and things like that, who knows if they were lower selves of somebody before, And by destroying natural places, then lower selves, whites, can't evolve to become souls. And so if they're going to become souls anyway, and they never had a chance to really evolve and be clear and be happy and empowered, you got a bunch of messed up people born into the world. So the more damage we do to the environment, the more damage we do to incoming souls coming in. They have to live with more craziness. The kind of stuff that people have to live through now is just unbelievable. Because of the, anyway, I could go on and on and on. But nature spirits, really important part of the all around ecosystem. And I remember once when I was traveling across the country and I was traveling through the Rocky Mountains of Colorado, and I wanted to go hike in the mountains, and I wanted to go in a place that reminded me of the Sierras. The Sierras are easily the most powerful mountains I've ever been in. If you've ever, wherever you are in the world, before it's too late, before all the forests burn down, go and spend some time in the Sierra Nevada mountains. Very powerful, giant, huge granite, which is filled with power. Granite is powerful rock. It's basically like a giant crystal. And so I went up to some mountains up in Colorado on my way, and I was hiking around and it felt dead. There was just nothing there. I couldn't feel anything. And I became aware that even though it looked really pretty and it looked like what I was expecting, high elevation with pine trees and all that, I was expecting to have the same kind of feelings that I had of power that flowed through me when I walked through the Sierras. And I came to the conclusion that the place was dead. That even though the trees were alive, but there wasn't any energy there. There was no spirit there. And I got back in my car and I drive back down, and 5 minutes later I came out of the mountains and I was at Vail, Colorado, and I could feel all the pretentiousness and all of the superficiality of having a lot of money, and just I go, oh, no wonder. That would drive away, if I was a nature spirit, that would drive me away too. I could be totally wrong about that, but that was my experience. But that's kind of, if we continue to keep living like this, we're going to continue to have that effect. And this is why on an unconscious level, we destroy nature. We destroy nature because we're unconsciously destroying those powers and that wants to focus us back to our infinite nature. But in order to do that, we have to die. So, my experience, like if, I don't know a lot of people who've actually spent real time alone in the wilderness. I mean, I did for years. I would go up into the Sierras and spend 2 weeks by myself, backpacking in the middle of, a wilderness that, God hasn't even seen yet. And it would have a profound impact on me. And you go there thinking, oh, this is going to be fun. And after, especially now with telephones, I mean, I'm so addicted to my telephone and my internet and my iPad. Back when I was doing it, we didn't have any of that stuff, but, it'd be horrible now. But what I remember is, after a day or two, I started going crazy. Like, I need to watch television, or I need to read a newspaper, or I need to call somebody on the phone. I mean, it was just after a few days. And it would take me about 6 days, and by the time I hit day 6, something would pop inside my brain. And then I would realize that all the things that I walked around thinking about that I thought meant something were completely meaningless. Money, prestige, career, what everybody thinks of me, You walk around thinking, oh, I'm not like that. Go and spend 2 weeks by yourself in the wilderness. You're going to find out real quick how much garbage you carry around in your head, which is all based on human society, which is all, illusion that we project onto ourselves. And cities, one of the reasons I like being away from big cities is because cities have their own dome around them. And it's a dome of false consciousness that is used to keep out unconsciously, is used to keep out powerful spirit energy. So that what you're doing is you're constantly being stimulated and formed by the emotions and the projections that other people have. And it's part of a society. In order for a society to hold together, we all have to be part of the same dream. And so each city and each country has its own bubble around it with its own dream reality. That in order to be part of that society, you have to be part of that dream. Which is, again, I've been out of the United States for a year now, and a lot of the dream that has been, just by being there, not necessarily anything else, just by being, in that country, the dream of the shared bond of some superficial, we are the United States of America, the freedom, the policemen of the world, and all that kind of stuff. When I'm out of that, you start to lose that. You're not influenced by it anymore. So, these are the kinds of things to think about when you think about nature and what nature can do, and the cleansing power of just walking through a forest, what it can do to your aura. Which reminds me, I need to go walking in the forest today, so I don't feel like I'm going crazy. All right, so I'm now happy to take any questions. Amy Luan question. Are the elves similar to Buddhas and bodhisattvas in Buddhism? Yes. Bodhisattva, what they say of the bodhisattvas is they sit on the edge of, infinity, and they turn back, and out of compassion, they seek to give enlightenment to human beings. That's a really flowery, sort of new agey way of saying the exact same thing. That's what elves do. Elves are the ascended masters of all races, and once they achieve, it's like there's different realms that we can go to. You can go to the underworld, and within the underworld there's a bunch of different realms. So if you die with unfinished business, you go to the underworld because your soul wants to come back, and you can, let's say you're Hitler, you're going to go to a place of horrific torment for who knows how long, and it's his own guilt, If he's still there, it's his own guilt. He's living the insanity of his own guilt. And when he gets over his own guilt and he realizes, who he is and is able to look and forgive himself, then he'll move on, and he'll probably have some very serious karma to deal with in future lifetimes. But if you die and go to the underworld and you were clear and were happy, but there's still things you have left to do, then you're going to celebrate and you're going to rest and rejuvenate. When you die, and you die in battle, which means that you die fighting for what you want in this life, and you're willing to die for your soul and the integrity of your soul, then you go to Valhalla, which is the Hall of the Chosen, and you'll be surrounded by the warriors who fight against Surt and his demons who are wanting to bring entropy to the world and destroy the universe. And all that means is that you go to a place of high vibrational essence where you keep human beings striving to live in the integrity of their soul. And then there's the elf home where the elves go, and my take is that these are either there's other places like Folkvang, which I think, if I'm saying that right, which is Freja's home, when she goes, and when the Valkyries go and pick up the warriors that have been slain in battle, which means they've died achieving what they want. Half of them go to Freya and the other half go to Odin. So I see, the ones that go to Freya are the ones that bring peace. And we could call them guardian angels. I get really emotional thinking about it. So it means I've hit something. They're the guardian angels that you see that are there taking care of you and helping you walk through things in life. And then there's the elf home, where those who have been in either or both of those places, they get to a place beyond that. They're that much further away from the drama that is human life, and they get to go to the home of the ascended masters, or the shining ones. The word elf is translated as shining. The Alps, the mountains of the Alps. Where do you think that word comes from? In Ice Age times, the Alps would have been this bright, shining just thing in the middle of nowhere. Imagine if everything's covered in ice. You would have seen, on a clear day, you would have seen the Alps shining the sun off of it for thousands of miles. And so they called them the Shining Alps. That's why they called them that. So the elves are the shining ones, the ones who shine from their truest of essence, the most pure of essences, and they're getting ready to go into the void of who knows what the hell happens after that. I mean, for us, it's like the void of emptiness, but I think it's just because we can't understand it. But that's the best way we can describe it. And they sit, and they stand on the edge of that, and they look back. They want to go into that bliss, but they look back onto humans and they remember, I was once a human. So they wait, and they, they're, if all you have to do is just face northwest, just face the direction of northwest and ask them for help. I'm getting really emotional thinking about it. Ask them for their help, and they will guide you. And whenever they guide you, their guidance will always be telling you how you can improve, which will make you more happy, but at the same time, how you will benefit others. If there's something in you, like there's a habit or a life path or a choice or a belief that you have that's damaging to you and to others, you will be filled with this feeling of, and when I operate from this level, I cause people damage in this way, and that's not helpful for anybody. They always give you messages about the continuity of everything, of all consciousness, because that's what they see from their highest of perspectives. They look down and they see that everything is connected. And it's just when we're in the middle of it that we can't see the forest for the trees, and we think we're these isolated beings walking around. So let's see, what else? And then she says, also, does this make the elves closer to enlightenment than the gods? Yes. I mean, if you read the mythology is really clear. Even the gods look at the elves with wonder. And the elves have such a strong connection to the dwarves, and the dwarves are beings of emotions and beings of magical power, but they're connected to human mental and psychological identity, which keeps us separate. And in the mythology, if the elves are left to themselves, if the dwarves are left to themselves, they become destructive and cantankerous and dangerous. But when the elves are communicating to the dwarves worship the elves. Just like, what's his name got it exactly right. Tolkien had it exactly right. When the dwarves in his writings, when they don't listen to the elves, they cause huge damage, and they're always wrapped up in selfish endeavors having to do with fame and wealth and warfare. But when they listen to the elves, they become the most devoted servants and workers for elves and men. And so this represents our subconscious intentions. And you have that direct connection. So again, all of this is in my books. If you're coming onto my channel and you haven't read my books, you're only getting this much of what I'm teaching. You really need to get into those books and do the practices. And the books, and all, of course, all the videos, and the lockdown package. This is the time for that, by the way. Now you get everything that I've put together in any kind of streaming package. You get it for almost nothing. You're going to save $2,000, I think, by getting that. I won't keep that forever. Thunderwizard.com is the subscription site. And you can, when you subscribe there, whatever level, you will get access to specific teachings that are not on this channel. I go into very specific things, and it's very inexpensive, and you can unsubscribe whenever you want. But trust me, you subscribe, you're not going to get through those videos in even 2 or 3 months. It's going to take a long time for you to get through all that. And courses.thunderwizard.com is everything else. Books. If you want to read this book yourself and not wait for me to read it, go get it. And then you'll have a better idea. Then watching this will be even more entertaining because you'll have already read it and you'll hear me go and expand further and further and how my thoughts have changed. All right, that's all my stuff. I don't see any more questions. Anyway, that was confusing. I just saw some. I won't get into it. Somebody's comment was confusing. Yeah, I don't see anything else on here. No more questions. I've done all my stuff. So that's it for me. How long have I been talking here? Probably a while. I've been talking for an hour and a half almost. All right. So that's it, guys. Thanks. I'll see you guys soon.